Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne, and today I'm excited to introduce you to my guest, Ashley Mizell. Ashley's from Kansas City, Kansas, and she's married to her high school sweetheart and has 3 sweet young boys. Just a few years back, Ashley was 28, joyfully raising her boys and working as a photographer when her whole world was flipped upside down and she suddenly started to go blind. Ashley, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today and to share your story with the audience. I think you're so inspirational.
Thank you so much for having me. Listening to that first part, it actually makes me choked up. It's like, I'm excited to talk about this and bring awareness. And yeah, thank you for having me on.
So I usually ask people to take us back and sort of tell what brings us here. And so for you, I think the story really started about 4 years ago. So I was hoping you could kind of take us back to that time and tell us a little bit about your diagnosis and how the related vision loss sort of unfolded for you.
Yes, absolutely. So I was actually a photographer and I was in the middle of sessions and I noticed that my eyes are messing up. I've always had perfect 20/20 vision. I hadn't gone to the eye doctor in years. So once I realized my eyes are messing up, I went to an eye doctor and he gave me glasses. And I kind of just figured glasses was a cure all, but I have later learned that's not the case. As the weeks were going on, my eyes weren't improving. It was just getting grayer. Everyone says, like, oh, is it black? No, it was like gray and white. I was waking up and it was just blurrier and blurrier. I was driving. I had a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old at the time and a 7-month-old. I was driving them to my older 2 to kindergarten and pre-K, and I was running into mailboxes. I was running into the curb, and my oldest son, Bentley, he was like, Mom, can you see? And I'm like, I can't, son. Like, I don't know what is going on. So I decided I needed to go get a second opinion. And I was like, okay, let's do this. So I go and I get a second opinion. And like I said, I really thought the first doctor, when he gave me glasses, that it was just going to be a cure-all. Like, oh, okay, you got glasses, now you can see again type of deal. But when I went and I got the second opinion, they took me back in this room and they looked in my eyes and she was just like, oh. I'm like, what? She was like, hold on. And they went and they got somebody else and brought him into the room and looked at my eyes. And it was just like, I'm sorry, you have a disease going on back there. What? What do you mean a disease? I felt frozen. I felt just like, I have to pick up my kids from school in a few hours. Like, what are you talking about? My life has to continue going on. And you're telling me I need to go be seen and figure out what's going on with my eyes. So I go to the specialist and I spent all day there, like 6 hours. And he said, come back tomorrow. I'm sorry, we can't figure out what is going on with your eyes. And I said, okay. And I went home that night and, oh man, went home and my phone went off, said unknown caller. And it was my doctor. And he was just like, you really need to get to the hospital. I want to admit you. I just can't stop thinking about your vision loss and how quickly it's going. Like, we need to try and save whatever's left we can. So my parents took me to the hospital and I remember going in that ER. And you know, when you go into an ER and obviously there's other people there that have problems. And eventually they got me back there and they pumped me with steroids. They pumped me with so much stuff. They kept me for 2.5 weeks, and they did test after test to figure out what was going on with me. They hadn't seen it. And eventually they were like, you have sarcoidosis. I've never even heard of sarcoidosis. And at this time, I'm telling you, like, I'm sitting in my hospital room. And when I say how miserable I was so miserable. to the point where people would walk in my room and they would say, "Hi, Ashley, how are you? I'm Dr. Da 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 da." And I'm like, stop asking me how I am. I am trying to survive right now. I don't want to have these little conversations anymore. So I want to say it was my parents or my husband, they put a sign on the door that was just like, walk in and get to the point. Don't ask her how she's doing. Because I was so angry. I was so confused. I just wanted my eyes to be better. And the information that they were giving me, it wasn't looking like that. They told me you're not going to get your vision back. And I remember feeling so sad and so lost. If you break an arm, you can go to the doctor and you know your arm is going to be fixed. And they're like, well, that's not for your eyes. Okay. So the day I left the hospital after being told I had sarcoidosis, and sarcoidosis is an autoimmune disease and it takes over major parts of organs in your body. I'm very lucky though, because it affected my eyes first. If it gets to your brain or like to your lungs, like it's not really good. So I'm very, very, very lucky. And I get checked like every 3 months for my brain and for my lungs and stuff, because this disease is it's kind of, I like to say, obnoxious. Like you don't know when it's going to attack. When I first got sick, it's where I couldn't walk. My legs from my knees down to my ankles were black and blue, just a part of the disease. But when I left that hospital, started my treatment, and I did my last nursing session because I had a 7-month-old. And that was one of the hardest parts in this whole journey because I have 3 amazing little boys. And as a mom, I always wanted to do my best to provide for them. And with my first son, I struggled so much with trying to nurse him. And you know, that mom guilt, like when you first have a kid, it's just kind of like, oh, you should be able to do this. Everybody does it. Like, it's just natural. Well, he was tongue tied and I didn't realize it. So I didn't really nurse him very long. I stopped like after 3 weeks. And then with my second son, I made it like 3 months. And I told myself, like, Joey and I, we had this bond and nobody had ever fed him but me. And then when I was in the hospital, that was the first time somebody else had to like step in and feed him and all of that. And don't get me wrong, he's great. He did wonderful with it. It was just a feeling in my life that was extremely difficult because I was finally able to do what I always wanted to do naturally. And because of the medicines and steroids and stuff, I did my last nursing session in the hospital. Well, then when I was leaving, man, when I got in that vehicle, my parents, I wasn't coming home. I was going to go live with my sister-in-law, my husband, and my kids. We were going to go over there because we just needed the help. There was no way we could come back to this house and it be set up. So we went over there, and when we were pulling out, man, it was so hard. That is another part of my life that I will always remember, that feeling of, okay, this is my life. I hear so much going on around me, and I don't have the ability to see what's going on. And it was so hard, that car ride, so hard. And I don't know if it's because when I was in the hospital, I was in like a routine of stuff. And when I went and I got in the vehicle, I just felt like, man, I should have my vision. I should be driving this vehicle. I shouldn't be like this. And that was so incredibly hard for me. My parents took us over to my sister-in-law's and brother-in-law's, and we lived there for a while because we needed the help. And it was so much appreciated. But I was in a depression. I allowed my sister-in-law to basically tend to my kids. I didn't want to be alive. I was so uncomfortable in my own skin just because of what the medicines were doing to my body. I ended up with Cushing syndrome, and that's just where you get super big on the back of your neck and shoulders and your face. And obviously it's nothing I could do about it. It was the medicines, but I was so uncomfortable. I didn't want to live anymore. I was tired of waking up. I just felt like I didn't have a purpose anymore. And I would hear those little footsteps because we were in the basement, and I would hear those footsteps. And I'm like, man, it was a different sound than I had ever heard those footsteps before. And it was like, whoa, hearing those, I'm imagining my kids like running and like just having fun. Like they were moving on with their life. And I sat in the basement, miserable, so down and out. And I wrote a suicide note because I was so done. By the grace of God, my parents are freaking phenomenal. I got a phone call, and it was my mom and my dad. And in the basement in our room, there was a door you could go outside right out there. And I was like, I'm going to work my way out there. Can you help me? They like FaceTimed me. And I sat out there and I just broke down to them. And I told them how I felt, how I didn't think I was strong enough, how I felt weak, how I felt like I lost so much. And they just said, Ashley, like, you have 3 little boys that love you and depend on you and think that you are the best mom with or without vision. And they said, you know, you don't have to have vision in order to have a successful, happy life. Right now, it feels like this is the worst, but it's temporary. And something clicked. And I'm so forever grateful because after that, I started pushing myself to be there for my kids more. Like my kids were sleeping up on the top floor. So I was in the basement, and then there was a level, and then there's the top floor where they were sleeping. And like I said, I had Lofgren syndrome on top of sarcoidosis. I ended up in a wheelchair. I was so tired of feeling like everyone else is tending for my kids, and my parents tell me like I can still be a mom and I still have a purpose. So do it, Ashley, do it. Don't just let everyone else do it for you. And I was in so much pain. I asked my family if there was any extra wheelchairs that we could set on the bottom of the steps on each floor of the house. And of course, they make it happen. And they're like, what for? And I'm like, because I want to be the one to get up and wake my kids up for school. I want to help them get ready for school. Is it going to take me a really long time? Yes. And I was using my arms, pulling myself up all flights of those stairs. And I would get up to the very top, and Billy, he would hear me, and then he would help me get in my wheelchair, and then he would push me to the room, and we would get him dressed. And in that moment of doing that so many times, I realized, Ashley, you can still do anything. You just have to do it differently. And that's okay. Does it suck? Absolutely. It does suck, but it's doable. And I have gotten a lot stronger and tougher. When we were living there, I finally told my husband, I said, Mike, we can continue living in this basement and getting help from our family, or we can actually try to do this with us, with our family, you know, with our 3 boys and me and you. And we eventually did. We moved back home, and it was hard because everybody's life has been affected and everybody heals differently. I was in therapy so much when I first got sick. I'm just now processing through therapy that I neglected my kids when I got sick, and that has took a toll on them. I was so focused on just trying to survive from this traumatic event that I failed them, and we are trying to pick up the pieces now.
I just want to say, for those that don't follow you, I mean, this isn't something that happened 20 years ago, right? This is just a handful of years, and you're still just going through it. But the thing I find most both inspirational and so authentic is you show up as your true self on social media. So for anybody that follows you, they see the good, bad, and ugly, right?
Yes.
For better or worse. But I love that. I love that because I think that's what's so inspirational about you. Like, did you do everything perfectly? Hell no.
Yeah.
Would anybody else? Hell no.
Yeah.
Who knows how to do this?
Exactly.
Who knows how to navigate losing your vision, at 28 years old? Like nobody.
Yeah.
And so I can obviously hear the hurt and all that you're still going through and feeling like you let your family down and whatnot. But I can tell you, for somebody that now watches you, you are showing up for them.
Thank you.
And those little boys are going to be so inspired by their mama. And I'm sure they already are inspired by their mama. But you show up for them more than many moms that don't have this going on for them. So I just want to make sure that you also hear that, because sometimes I know we've all been through our stuff. That's the premise of my show. Life is hard and messy and complicated and it's difficult. So we all have our stuff and our crosses to bear. And I know it's sometimes also hard to see the good
Yeah.
when we are feeling like we weren't enough and there's regrets,
Yeah.
right? You can't look backwards though, because you can't fix it. But I just want to say I see you and I see you showing up for those boys, and it will make a difference at the end of the day. Like you can't undo it. You can't undo what happened. And when they're grown, they will understand the situation that was at hand when you had that short span, that very short span in the hole that you maybe weren't showing up for them. They will get it.
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
It's true. It's really true.
It's kind of crazy because the older they get, it's like they are going out of their way to make sure I'm still included in stuff.
Yeah.
This company sent me this big coloring sheet. It's like the size of our table. And we just had it out with the crowns and everything. And Bentley, my oldest, he was just like, Mom, do you want to do this with us? And I was like, I really do. I just don't really know how I could figure out how I could color with you. And he was just like, here, I have an idea. He was like, can I have one of your puffy paint pens? And I was like, yeah, and he took one of my puffy paint pens and he outlined all the big stuff. And once it dried, I got to sit down and I just got to color with him. And I'm like, such a sweet, sweet boy, just trying to still make sure like his mama can still do it with him.
Yes. And it's a lesson, right? I actually saw you post that and I thought, boy, oh boy, what a lesson on thinking outside of the box. Because to the point you made earlier, you prove over and over, and I want to talk about a few of those things, but you really can do almost everything. Yeah. It's just that it looks different.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we get married to the outcome and our expectations around what we thought it should look like, right? It's something that our group works on a lot, is that's where all the discontent and resentment comes in, when our expectations don't meet reality. For most of us, that's true. Most of us have a vision of our life and it never pans out. Like it just doesn't look like the one we predicted.
100%.
And learning that it's okay and learning to just enjoy in the moment of what it is, that's where the gold is. And he's given you a little lesson on that, right? On thinking outside of the box.
Oh, yes. That's the thing, the first year or two. So it's actually coming up on 4 years of, on Valentine's Day is the day that they told me, like, I'm sorry, but your vision, like, it's not coming back. And the anniversary is coming up. And I sit back and I think about where I was last year, in the year before, in the year before that. And I'm like, holy moly, these kids and we have made this work. My kids love football. I can still play catch with them. We figured out a way. I stand on the trampoline and one of them will be out in the yard and they'll clap or they'll say, hey, mom, hey, mom. And I will throw it to that and they'll run and they'll catch it. And then they throw it back onto the trampoline and it's netted in so I can just feel around when it falls onto the trampoline. It's like we have found ways to make it work because they still want me involved in that. That really makes me happy because one of my kids has been getting made fun of at school for having a blind mom. And he's been struggling with it. And he finally was just like, you know what, Mom, you can do anything though. The only thing you can't do is drive. So I'm tired of this kid saying something. And I'm like, maybe you just need to tell him that. Like, my mom is no different than your mom. And I'm like, oh, kids don't get it.
They don't get it. And it's hard. And I will say, as a mom of grown children, and I know you know this in your head, it's different when you're going through it, but if he wasn't getting made fun of because he had a blind mom, he'd be getting made fun of because his hair was the wrong color, or he wore glasses, or he ran too slow, or whatever. Kids are mean, right?
Oh, yeah. That is such a great perspective. Oh my goodness. Thank you. I'm actually going to use that perspective on him because they're actually using me versus finding something about him.
Yeah.
That's actually cool to think about, you know?
Yes. And I think if he asks his brother, everybody gets made fun of, right? So maybe that's like a
Yes.
goofy thing you do with the family at dinner one night. It's like, all right, what did you get made fun? But you grow up and get like, I mean, yes, we all have our battle scars, but my point is it's tough going through it, but it's going to be something. There's going to be something.
The reward is awesome. Like, I'll tell you, my kids, they're in basketball, my older two, and they're in a competitive team and they're in an optimist team. And they're not basketball players by any means. They're just doing this to stay active for football and to try and be in shape and be with their friends, you know? And they were like, Mom, you don't have to go to like any of the tournaments because we know it's going to be super busy in there and it's just hard for you to like walk around. And I'm like, excuse me? Oh no, your mama is going to everything and you will have my arm with me and we are going to do it. And I'll tell you, we have been going to all of these tournaments and doing all of this stuff. And at the beginning of the season, they thought it was just going to be them and their dad. And now it's just last Saturday, I had one of my kids, we had a challenge before we went to the basketball game. They were like, Mom, I challenge you. And I was like, bring it. What's the challenge? They're like, see if you can even score a point. I was like, let's do it. And one of my boys went down there with my white cane and hit the end of the goalpost so I could hear it. And Oliver put me in the spot and goes, right here, Mom. And I said, okay, hit it one more time, Bentley. And he did it. And I made it the first shot. And it's moments like that. I didn't even think I was going to be a part of this year because I didn't think like I could handle going and being around a gym full of people, you know?
I so love that you brought that example up because I saw your post and I literally thought in my head, I wonder how many times that took, right? Like I did. I mean, I can see and I wouldn't have been able to get it in. So,
Oh, girl, everyone was wondering that. I'm pretty sure my dad was like, Ashley, you played basketball all in school and you didn't make any points.
right.
Like, how did you do that?
Well, maybe, just maybe your senses, your other senses have compensated. Like we know that happens, right? When other things occur.
100%.
Yeah.
We actually went on a big family vacation. There was like 26 of us. We went and all my in-laws and stuff, we went to Florida and we went to this island, North Captiva Island over the summer. And, you know, those bags that you can play like cornholes or whatever, you
Yeah.
have to like
Yeah. The bean
toss
bags.
into
Yeah.
a hole.
Yeah.
Yeah. All my nieces and nephews, we had this at our house and they were like playing it. And I'm like, man, I really want to play, you know? And, they're like, oh yeah. And Ashley, let's see if you can do it. And I was like, okay. So they would go down there and they would clap over it and then I would make it. Well, here's the crazy thing is I said, now I challenge you guys, close your eyes and you do it. They made it. They would make the ones with their eyeballs closed, but if their eyes were open, they couldn't do it. And I'm like,
Wow.
exactly. You guys are going by your other senses. Like
Wow.
you can do it. It's like a rewarding, like it's kind of crazy how rewarding little things like that are.
Yeah, but I think it's the confidence builder that you can do anything. And that's part of what I love to watch when you go and mail your packages. So again, for people that aren't familiar, you do, I think it's Poshmark.
Yes.
So you sell stuff on social media and then when you go ship it, you did a clip and I saw you like walking from the house and going out to mail it.
Yeah.
And like, I'll be honest. I mean, I don't know if people are honest with you, but I'll be honest. My initial thought was, how well is she going to navigate this walk? Right. And then I watched you and you got up, you took your packages, you walked down the hall, you opened the door, you walked outside. I'm like, nothing different, zero things different.
You are so awesome. I'll tell you, I actually almost got hit a couple weeks ago because I decided, I'm going to walk across the street myself and we live, it's not a fast road. It's like 20 miles an hour neighborhood, And next thing you know, I walk across the thing and my husband's like, Ashley, stay over there. There's a car right there. Pull in the car. The guy was like, you just go ahead and get your mail and you walk back over, ma'am. I was like, oh, thank you.
All right. So yeah, there are some things you have to think about, of course. But the general point is that now you're really learning. And this is the message, I think, to people, right? That, yeah, we all have our messes and we all have our crosses to bear, but you can't let them get you. You have to find a way out of it and make the most of it because you can't change it.
100%. 100%. So I was a photographer before I got sick. Photography was my passion. I loved it. Like I thought that that's what I would always do. And I self-taught, and it was like when a career and a passion come together, it's a beautiful thing. And that's what I
Yes.
thought photography was. Well, then after getting sick and I lost photography, like I had weddings booked out until 2022. And this was in 2018 or 19 that I got sick. Yeah, 2019. And I just, I wanted to still do photography, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. So I started sharing my story online and just like showing people the tools that I learned from just YouTube and the School of Blind. Like, hey, let's show the world these tools and I can still do photography while doing it. So it kind of like made my heart happy at the same time. Well, then all of a sudden it just took off. And now I'm like a blind photographer and I work for companies and they pay, it's ridiculous. They pay a blind person to do video, AKA me. I'm like, say what? It's not.
Well, the proof's in the output, right? If you can still do it. I mean, that's the thing.
Yes.
And so you're obviously producing something that's valuable to them. And I'm sure your story, right? It's so inspirational. And I think people seeing it and wanting to support you, of course, is also there too. And that's okay. That's part of it, right? It takes a community and it takes lots of people to help lift each other up. We all have our ups and downs.
I have had so much love from the community.
Guys, I want to take a pause there. I hope you're really enjoying this episode as much as I did making it. I love talking with Ashley, and we really dug into what's going on in her life, and the episode got a little long. So we're breaking it up into two, and I hope you will join us next Saturday for the release of the second part, where Ashley will get into what it's like to be a mom, what the community has done for her and all that they've given her, whatever life looks like now, and some really inspiring and insightful advice for somebody that's going through anything either similar or just a really hard patch. If you enjoyed this and think anybody else would get some value out of it, I'd appreciate it if you'd share it. Thanks a lot, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and come back and listen again. Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.